Long ago, nestled between quiet hills and whispering woods, there lay a village that didn't exist on any map. It was called Nervan, though. No traveler had ever passed through it. The roads that led to it were soft with moss, and the winds around it always hummed a lullaby. Nervan was a village that only appeared when the moon was full. During the day, it seemed like an ordinary field, but as soon as the moonlight poured down like silver silk across the hills, Nervan would slowly awaken. One by one, little warm lights would appear in tiny wooden homes with slanted roofs and flower pots hanging from their windows. The river nearby would begin to glow like it had stars swimming in it, and the air would become cooler, calmer, and dreamier. But what made Nervan truly magical was not its beauty. It was its people. The villagers of Nervan never rushed, never shouted, never worried. Their lives were woven with peace. They spoke gently, walked slowly, and believed that every night was a gift. Their favorite time was when the moon rose above the tallest hill and touched every rooftop with its glow. Among them lived a little girl named Mira. She had the softest eyes and the most curious heart. Mira loved listening to the stories the elders told. Stories of stars that whispered, of owls that remembered forgotten songs, and of rivers that carried dreams. Every night, before sleeping, Mira would sit by her window wrapped in a soft woolen shawl. The moonlight would shine on her face as she looked up at the sky and whispered, "Good night, moon. Please bring sweet dreams." But one night, something strange happened. The moon didn't rise. The sky remained dark, and the village didn't wake up like it always did. The lamps remained unlit, and the river didn't shimmer. Nervan felt quiet. Not the usual peaceful quiet, but the kind of silence that makes even the breeze feel unsure. Mira noticed it first. She tiptoed out of her bed and peeked out the window. There was no moon, no glow, no hum in the air. Her heart felt a little heavy. She quickly ran to Grandmother Ela, the oldest and wisest woman in the village. "Dottie," Mira whispered, "where is the moon tonight? Why isn't Nervan glowing?" Grandmother Ela opened her gentle eyes, smiled faintly, and said, "Ah, little Mira, sometimes the moon forgets the way when the world becomes too noisy." Mira asked, puzzled. "Yes," Dottie said softly. "The world outside Nervan has become restless. So many people thinking, running, worrying, shouting. The moon listens to everything, and when it hears too much noise, it hides. It waits until someone calls it back. With calmness, with kindness, with stillness." Mira sat quietly for a moment, and then whispered, "Can I call the moon back?" Dottie smiled. "You're the perfect one to try." That night, Mira walked to the top of the hill, the tallest one, where the moon usually kissed the land first. She sat down with her shawl, closed her eyes, and began to hum. It wasn't a song she knew. It was a soft, simple melody, like the sound of a leaf falling or a ripple in water. She hummed gently, patiently, from her heart. And far away, beyond the clouds, the moon heard her. At first, just a tiny sliver of silver light peeked through the sky. Then slowly, like a sleepy child waking from a nap, the moon began to rise. Soft, round, and glowing. Like warm milk, it shone. Once again, over Nervan, the houses lit up. The river sparkled. The flowers on windowsills turned their heads toward the light. The breeze returned with its lullaby. Nervan was back, and at the top of the hill, Mira smiled. Not because she had called the moon, but because she had learned something very special. She had learned that peace is powerful, that when the world is noisy, soft hearts can still be heard. That kindness and calmness are like a language that even the moon understands. That night, Nervan celebrated in the gentlest way. No parties, no fireworks, just warm milk, sweet lullabies, and soft lanterns floating in the sky, like glowing dreams. As Mira fell asleep, Dottie whispered into her ear, "You have the moon's heart now. Never let the world's noise steal your calm." And from that night on, whenever the moon felt lost or tired, it knew there was one little girl in a village of peace, waiting on a hilltop, humming a melody made of moonlight. The seasons gently turned as they always did in Northern, not with sudden storms or loud winds, but with quiet shifts, the slow goldening of leaves, the crisp sweetness in the air, the hush of snowfall like lullabies from the clouds. Mira grew, as all children do, but she carried with her the same softness, the same gift for stillness that once called the moon back home. She still climbed the hill, each full moon night, not always to call the moon, but simply to sit with it. Sometimes she would hum, sometimes she would just breathe and listen, and the moon always listened back. As years passed, other children in Nervin began to follow her to the hilltop. At first, they were curious about the girl who spoke to the sky, about the stories grandmother Isla told of how Mira once brought the moon back. But as they sat with her, they discovered something deeper. The quiet between words, the calm beneath the stars, and the feeling of belonging to something gentle and vast. They learned how to listen, not just with their ears, but with their hearts. One boy, Tanu, began writing poems so light they seemed made of wind. A girl named Lyra started weaving shawls that carried warmth even in the middle of winter. Another, Jory, began planting night-blooming flowers that only opened when the moonlight touched them. The hill became a place of stillness, a circle of quiet creators, children and elders alike, who understood the rhythm of Nervanese nights. The villagers called them the monkey. And even when Grandmother Illa's stories grew slower, softer, and finally faded into the stars themselves, the songs remained. The hums, the hushes, the lullabies. They all lived on in the voices of Nervin's children. One winter evening, many years later, the moon once again did not rise. But this time, the village didn't grow afraid. Lamps remained dark. The river stayed still. But there was no worry, only a gentle understanding. Without needing to speak, the villagers walked together up the hill, wrapped in shawls, holding hands. Mira, now older, sat in the middle, her eyes still full of moonlight. She closed her eyes, placed her hand on the grass, and began to hum. And with her, 100 others joined in, each voice like a thread in a great silver tapestry of calm. No one rushed, no one shouted. They simply hummed, and the moon, listening once more, returned, not just brighter, but closer, as if bowing in gratitude. That night Nervin glowed more than ever before, and from far away, travelers who had never found the hidden roads swore they saw a shimmer between two hills, a soft light like a dream they once had but could never quite remember. They say Nervin still appears only in moonlight, but now it's not just the moon that awakens it. It's the song, the stillness, the memory of one small girl who taught the night to listen. And if you ever find yourself walking beneath a full moon, and the world feels just a little too noisy, pause, breathe, hum. You might hear a lullaby on the wind, and if you listen carefully, you may just find yourself at the edge of Nervin where lanterns float, rivers glow, and peace hums gently through the hills. Many years passed, and the world outside, Nervin continued its hurried dance. Tall buildings rising like forests of glass, engines buzzing, clocks ticking faster with each passing day. But Nervin remained untouched by time, as though cradled in a pocket of forever. Mira, now with silver strands in her hair and lines around her eyes, shaped like gentle smiles, had become the village's elder, the new grandmother of stories, of hushes, of moonlight wisdom. The children called her Mary Dottie, and they would sit cross-legged around her, each moonlit evening, wide-eyed and still, as she spun tales from the stars. But one evening, Mary Dottie told them a different story, one not of the past, but of the future. There will come a time, she began, her voice soft as dusk, when Nervin may be needed by others. People far away, people whose hearts have forgotten how to slow down. The children leaned in closer, in dreams. She continued, some of them already wander close. They don't know it, but their hearts remember something they've never seen. And one day, someone from outside might truly find the way here. Not by map, not by road, but by stillness, by listening. One child, little Envy, asked, Will we show them our village? Dottie, Mary Dottie smiled. Only if they come gently. Only if they listen with their hearts, like you do. And so the villagers began to prepare, not with gates or signs, but with invitations woven into their lives. Extra cups of warm milk set by the fire, hammocks tied gently between trees, blank journals placed near windows for any guests who wished to write. They began to plant seeds that bloomed with scents, known to soothe tired spirits, and lanterns were crafted with stories etched onto the paper. So if anyone followed the glow, they would read tales in the light. Time passed, as it always does, slowly, sweetly, Then, one night, just as the moon rose above the hill, someone arrived. She wasn't a child. She was not lost. Exactly. But her eyes held the weight of many busy years. She stepped gently, hesitantly, as though part of her remembered how to be soft. And when she reached the village, she did not knock or speak. She simply sat by the glowing river, closed her eyes, and listened. The villagers watched from their windows. Mary Dottie now walked slowly to her, sat beside her, and said nothing. Together, and in that sound, the newcomer felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Like being held by silence, like finding home inside a breath. She stayed the night, wrapped in a shawl of peace, and when the morning came, she did not ask how to return to She simply whispered, "Thank you." From that day forward, it became a quiet tradition. Those who truly needed Norven would sometimes arrive, not through travel, but through listening, through remembering something soft and slow that still lived deep inside them. And every time they did, Mary Dottie would greet them not with questions, but with warmth, with stories, with a hum that reminded them that they were still whole. Norvan never grew larger. It never appeared on any map, but its circle widened, not by land, but by heart, because peace, like moonlight, travels far, and so Nirvan remains. A village of hushes, a home between heartbeats, a place where dreams glow and the moon always remembers the way. Because one small girl once sat on a hill and hummed a melody the world had forgotten. And maybe, just maybe, if you find yourself lost beneath the stars and you stop long enough to listen, you'll hear the faint sound of humming on the breeze, and you'll know you're not far from seasons folded into one another, like soft pages in a beloved book, and Nirvan lived on. Not in grand tales carved in stone, but in the quiet echo of those who carried its stillness with them. It was said that every soul who had once touched Nirvan's hush would carry a little piece of moonlight in their heart forever. One crisp autumn evening, when the wind wore the scent of fallen leaves and chimney smoke, Mary Dottie gathered the children once more under the old moon tree, the one that bloomed only at night, its petals glowing faintly like candle flames. She sat cross-legged on her woolen mat, her eyes closed for a long moment before she spoke. "It's time I teach you the last story," she said gently, "not because it's the end, but because you must become the storytellers now." The children blinked. "But Dottie," whispered Tylu, the youngest of them all, "you know the stories better than anyone." Mary Dottie chuckled softly. "Ah, little flame, stories don't live in one voice. They live in every ear that truly listens, and every heart that remembers." She looked up at the glowing moon and continued, "There is a story not yet told, of how one day Norvan will no longer be hidden." Gasps fluttered like birds through the group. "But, ... How?" asked Anvi. "What if the noise finds us again?" Mary Dady's eyes crinkled with her smile. "Because by then, the world will have changed. Not all at once, but one heart at a time. All of you, and the ones who come after you, will carry Nirvan out into the world. Not the village itself, but what it means. Peace, slowness, wonder, listening. You'll plant it wherever you go." She paused and placed a small wooden box at her feet. "Inside this box are seeds. Moonflower seeds. The kind that bloom only when the night is quiet. Each of you will take one when you're ready. You'll know where to plant it. You'll feel it, like a soft tug in your chest. What happens if we forget? asked Lyra. Mary Dottie leaned forward and whispered, "The moon will remind you." That night, Norvin shimmered brighter than ever before. Lanterns floated higher. The river sang with silver threads, and every window glowed with a golden hush. And though Mary Dady's voice grew quieter in the days that followed, the hilltop never did, for the children began to sit where she once sat, telling stories to the stars and humming songs of peace into the wind. Years passed. The children became keepers. The keepers became storytellers. Some left the village, carrying seeds and songs with them into the restless world. Some stayed, holding the silence steady like lighthouse beacons, and in the most unexpected places. A balcony in a city, a bench beside a busy train station, a garden between tall buildings. Moonflowers began to bloom. They bloomed only when someone sat quietly beside them, when someone chose to pause, to listen, to hum. People would stop and wonder, what is this place? Why does the air feel softer here? And in those moments, brief and magical, Norvin had grown, not in size, but in reach, because Norvin was never just a village. It was a song, a remembering, and it lives still, beneath the full moon, inside those who know that even in a noisy world, a soft heart is the strongest light of all. Many moons rose and fell over Norvin, but time moved gently, as if it too had learned to breathe slower within its borders. The old stories remained, but now new ones began to bloom. Not of the past, but of the becoming. One evening, just as the mist curled low over the hills and the moon slipped above the trees like a whispered promise, a traveler arrived. Not by accident and not by dream, but by intention. She was young, though her eyes carried a long search. In her hands, she held a small, worn journal. Its pages were filled with questions. Not the kind that seek answers, but the kind that seek peace. She had heard rumors of a place where silence was sacred, where the moon still listened, where a girl once sang light back into the sky. She had followed not roads, but signs. A dream of glowing flowers blooming on a city rooftop, a stranger humming a tune on a quiet bench, a story told to her by an old woman in a library who simply smiled and said, "Listen for the hush, and you'll find the way." And now, she was here, at the edge of the village. She paused, not out of fear, but reverence. Norvin met her not with fanfare, but with warmth. The gentle flicker of lanterns, the scent of jasmine and wood smoke, the soft murmur of water that sounded like lullabies. She took a single step forward, and the village exhaled, welcoming her home, though she had never been there before. That night, she sat with the moon. Their faces were new, but their hearts carried the same ancient stillness. They asked her no questions, offered no explanations. Instead, they handed her a cup of warm milk, and when the wind shifted, they hummed. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she felt quiet inside. Later, a young keeper named Nilo handed her something wrapped in linen, a single moonflower seed. "You don't have to plant it right away," he said softly, "but you'll know when it's time." The traveler smiled, a quiet, deep smile, and nodded. She stayed for 3 nights. Then she left, as gently as she came. Norvin never asked her to stay. It only asked her to remember, and she did. Years later, far from the village, in a rooftop garden tucked between towers of glass, a moonflower bloomed. People walked past it at first, hurried, distracted, burdened with the rush of their days. But then someone paused, and then another, and then someone began to hum. Norvin was there, in the pause, in the breath, in the hush between all the noise. And now, wherever the moon shines, wherever soft hearts listen, Norvin travels like light across still water. It is no longer lost in moonlight. It is the moonlight, gathered in the quiet places, kept alive by those who believe that gentleness can change the world. And if, one night, you find yourself weary, and the world feels too loud, step outside beneath the stars, close your eyes, listen, breathe. You might hear a hum on the wind, and if you do, you've already found your way back. not far from where the city lights dim into shadows, where rooftops meet sky and children still chase dreams. With their eyes, the moonflower garden began to grow, not from the soil alone, but from the stillness planted in hearts. The traveler, now older, now wiser, was called Mir. Some said she had changed after her journey, that her voice softened, and her presence calmed even the busiest of places. She never spoke of Norvan in detail. She only smiled and listened, as if she were always waiting for someone to ask, not with their mouth, but with their soul. And when they did, when someone truly asked, with wonder, with longing, with stillness, she would hand them a seed, just one, and say, "Not every garden grows in daylight." The moonflowers spread, not quickly, not loudly. They bloomed in quiet corners, beside hospital windows, in the pockets of courtyards between schools, even near prisons, where someone had finally learned to forgive. Each flower became a listening place, a remembering place, and people began to return, not to a village on a map, but to a feeling, to a truth. That peace is not the absence of noise. It is the presence of care. And care, when whispered across 1,000 hearts, becomes a hush strong enough to change the world. Back in Norvan, the lanterns still floated on quiet nights, like stars dreaming upward. The moonkeepers were many now, children and elders, wanderers and weavers of silence. They no longer watched the horizon for travelers. They watched the sky, because one day, it was said, the moon would send back the echo of every hum ever offered in kindness. It would fill the hills with music too soft for machines to hear, but not too soft for hearts. And on that night, Norvan would no longer be a hidden village. It would be everywhere. In lullabies sung to babies, in poems left on park benches, in hands that held gently, and voices that knew when not to speak, in humming, in healing, in people who chose, even for a moment, to be still. Some say the moon has already begun collecting those hums, wrapping them in silver light, tucking them into its craters like keepsakes. And maybe, just maybe, one night soon, you'll hear the wind shift. You'll pause, you'll breathe, you'll hum, and the moon will open its glowing eyes, smile softly, and whisper back, "Welcome home." Years slipped by, like river mist, and though the world outside spun faster, Norvan's rhythm never changed. It beat like a gentle drum in the distance of existence, not demanding to be found, only waiting to be remembered. In a quiet valley, under a tree whose roots were older than stories, Mary Dady's journal was passed to the next moon. Her name was Laya, a girl who had never known a world without noise, yet had always longed for one with hush. Leia had come to Nervan as a child, after a long season of storms. Storms not of wind, but of life. She had been frightened of silence once, afraid it meant being forgotten. But Norvan had taught her otherwise. That silence can be presence, that hush can be love, and that stillness is where hearts finally hear themselves. Now, she turned the pages of the old journal, its ink soft by time. The last entry, written in Mary Dady's looping hand, read, "Peace does not vanish. It travels. It moves like moonlight, not asking to be seen, but always there for those who look softly enough." Norvan is not just a place to find. It is something to become. Leia closed the journal and looked around her. The children were already gathering under the moon tree. Some had come from nearby hills, others had come in dreams. But one boy, quiet and barefoot, had come a very long way. You could see it in the way he held his shoulders, like someone who had carried more than his share of invisible weight. He sat at the edge of the circle, unsure if he belonged. Leia smiled, just as Mary Dottie once had, and invited him to hum with the others. He shook his head. She didn't press. Instead, she reached into a small cloth pouch and placed something in his palm. A moonflower seed, and a note that said only, "You don't have to bloom all at once." The boy blinked, and then, just barely, the smallest sound, a breath, shaped like a melody. He hummed, softly, brokenly, bravely, and the wind heard him. Somewhere, high above the hills, the moon tilted its glowing face toward new. One more heart had opened. One more soul had remembered how to be still. That night, across many cities, people stirred from their sleep and whispered, "Did you hear that?" They couldn't explain it. A warmth in the air, a hush in their bones, a memory of a place they'd never been, but somewhere in their dreaming hearts, they hummed, and Nirvana grew, not on a map, but in the soul of the world. Because the secret had never changed. The moon still listens, peace still waits, and Nirvana still lives. In every quiet moment where love moves slowly enough to be felt. So, tonight, if you find yourself beneath the stars, and your heart feels full, or broken, or searching, breathe, close your eyes, and hum. The moon is listening.